Within the Trail series, there have been many instances where dragons have had some influence over the continent of Zemuria. Some may argue that the use of dragons is just a convention within the fantasy genre, or that this is just Falcom's way of having a callback to the origin of the Legend of Heroes series, Dragon Slayer. However, this is Falcom we're talking about. Within Trails, nothing is ever just a coincidence. So let's first start with the dragon that we're most familiar with. Ragnar is an ancient dragon who is the holy beast we meet in Trails in the Sky's second chapter, who made an oath with Adios to observe the Septium of space, aka the Oriel in the Burrow. Now some of you might be thinking, why am I focusing on this one species? And the answer to that is the fact that we've only ever met one dragon throughout 12 games. The lack of dragons would suggest the species to be extremely rare. However, this notion is contradicted within these games with references to dragons being made as early as Chapter 1 in Trails in the Sky first chapter. In Kush's Bar, you can find Lyndon, a scholar who will explain dragons were around even before the Great Collapse, but have suddenly disappeared. An additional detail you can obtain when talking with Lyndon is from a cell, where she will mention how dragons have been in the Burrow for some time, but there have been a lack of science since the Orbital Revolution. Both pieces of information are reinforced by Vince and Fran, two children in Revenue Village. For the former, Vince will collaborate that dragons are from ancient times, whereas Fran will then support the latter by mentioning how her father knew of a dragon within the region when he was younger. The last piece of evidence in first chapter is Santos, who works at the Gransel Museum. He explains that in ancient times, humans lived side by side with dragons. These dragons were known to live within the Bose region for decades, but there's been a lack of sightings as of recently. Just from these 4 NPCs alone, there are 5 key facts about dragons. First, dragons have been around since before the Great Collapse. Second, the species of dragon existed alongside humans. Third, there's been a lack of dragon sightings in the past few decades. Fourth, a singular dragon still exists within the Bose region. And fifth, there is some relationship between the disappearance of dragons and the discovery of orbments. I'll discuss this possible relationship later on in the video. For the time being, if we continue into second chapter, we do find out some additional information. For example, the dragon that the people of Bose have spotted is Ragnar, with his nest located north of Nabal Valley. Ironically enough, even Ragnar knows of Cash's sprite, as the two sparred with one another back in 1182 before he fell into a deep slumber. This would account for the lack of sightings for the past 20 years, but it still doesn't explain what Stell says, as augment technology was invented around 1150, so there's still a 30-ish year gap. Speaking to Wemler in Nabal Valley also provides some information depending on the party member you bring. The one we'll focus on for the moment is Chloe, who will say there are records of sightings of dragons that go back as far as 900 years to Liberal's founding. This is around year 300 within the timeline. Finally, if we continue to speak to Lyndon later on, we can get further details on ancient dragons, with him saying that dragons are supposed to be gentle and intelligent beings, before confirming that from Ragnar's appearance he is indeed a dragon from ancient times. So if Ragnar is indeed from before the Great Collapse, the question remains as to what happened to the other dragons, as both Lyndon and Santos referred to there being multiple dragons. Outside of dialogue, there are even more references to dragons, the most obvious one being Agate's Dragon Dive and Dragon Fall. This can be attributed to Agate originally being from the Bose region, so this is just a nod to Ragnar's influence. However, there's the ingredient of dragon beans which can be bought in Ruin, Zeiss and Gransel, so clearly the dragon's influence isn't just limited to Bose. But then there are items of armor like dragon skin jumpsuit, dragon skin shoes, dragon tree jumpsuits, and dragon boots. This extends to a couple of weapons as well, like Dragon's Fang Whip and Dragon's Bane. Interestingly enough, the boots and Dragon Bane both have descriptions that mention the Middle Ages, with the boots reading Middle Ages footwear modelled on a dragon in the clouds, and the weapon reading a sword loved by a mercenary who lived during the Middle Ages. So this once again reinforces that dragons were still around as late as the year 600. If we combine this with everything above, we can actually formulate a timeline of the dragons within the Burrow. So we know that dragons lived side by side with humans within the ancient civilization, but then the Great Collapse happened. However, dragons were still around and were spotted during the Burrow's founding in the year 300 and in the Middle Ages in the year 600. We don't have a specific date as to when the species as a whole disappeared, but from Estelle's comment it would be around 1150 when orbments were discovered by Epstein. Ragnar was still active around this time, as the parents of Revenue Village remember seeing Ragnar when they were children. Ragnar would then enter a deep slumber after sparring with Cassius in 1982. This therefore explains the lack of science for the past 20 years. There is, however, one obstacle that makes this complicated, and that's Moon Door 5 in Trails in the Sky III. During that door, Mary meets a baby dragon that has a striking resemblance to Ragnar, and this is even confirmed within the arena with it being called Baby Ragnar. The problem being that this dragon claims to only be 320 years old, as it was born in the year 880. Now there have been multiple theories as to what is going on here, but that could be its own video, so for simplicity's sake, let's just assume that this is indeed Ragnar's kid. We already know from Rosalia in Cold Steel 4 that it is possible for holy beasts to reproduce and pass on their responsibility. Now dragons aren't exclusive to just Liberl, as Oliver mentions the presence of dragons in Erebonia when talking to Stell. He will explain how there are legends of dragons within Erebonia, especially the southern parts. The Imperial Institute of Science was even going to investigate the species, but this was interrupted when the 100 Days War broke out. Now, you could easily write this off as the science in Erebonia as just being Ragnard, as Erebonia does border north of Liberl. However, within Cold Seal 1, there is a book called Erebonia Folklore, and in Volume 3 it makes mention of a dark dragon. It reads, an evil dragon said to have emerged from beneath the earth in Heimdall during the early Dark Ages. It is said that the miasma it exhaled turned the capital into a city of the dead, resulting in Erebonia's centre being temporarily moved to St. Arcs to the south. This turns out to be a fact, as Class 7 fought Zoroaraga's skeleton remains in 1204, and later fought the fully revived Zoroarga in 1206. We find out that this dragon was active during the Dark Ages, so around the year 300, and would go on to be killed by Emperor Hector I in the year 371. Similar to the Sky Games, Cold Seal has multiple mentions of dragons. The most prolific example would be Twin Dragon's Bridge in eastern Erebonia. There are also several references throughout the battle mechanics. In the crafts, it can be seen with Rain's Flame Dragon, Angelica's Dragon Boost and Dragon Kick. Then for weapons, it's seen with Laura's Pendragon, Gaius' Blue Dragon Spear, Yuna's Dragon's Claw, Angelica's Dragon Fist, Kurt's Cerulean Dragons, and Fee's Dragon Tooth. Although not in the title, there are other weapons that refer to dragons within their description, like Randy's Drag Rendil, Rich's Long G Downpour, Crow's Savage Smug, and Arios' Kurikara no Tachi. The last few references can be seen in armor called Dragon Skin Jumpsuit, the Dragon Vein and Dragon Vision Quartz, and within the last arc Temperos Roar, with 3 dragons are summoned. When we move to Crossbell, there isn't anything too obvious, but there are still references to dragons. For example, Sao is known as the White Orchid Dragon, there is the Dragon Fried Rice and the Dragon Tomyong recipes. Rixa's craft is Dragon Claws, Lloyd's S-Craft has him rise like a dragon, you can obtain a quartz called Dragon Vision, and lastly there is the Lord Inferno art that summons a dragon. However, something that I should note, especially when I get to Calvard, is that dragon in Japanese is Dorlagun. You'll notice in the majority of the examples I've given, the Japanese names aren't using Dorlagun. Instead, they are using Chinese, which is Long. When you take this into consideration, you'll notice that Falcom is actually making a distinction between Western and Eastern Cimmeria, which makes Long Lao in Eastern Street pretty fitting. You'll even notice that the Eastern characters throughout the series will use Long or have it associated with them. For example, Zin and Kilika, who are both Calvardian, refer to Septium veins as dragon veins. Angelica uses the Taito fighting style, which is Calvardian. Rin and Arios are practitioners of the 8 Leaves 1 Blade technique, which was developed by Yon Kofai, who is Calvardian. Both Riksha and Sao are Calvardian, so Falcom is making an active effort to draw parallels with Eastern Cimmeria and dragons. Now, since the Calvard games haven't been localized yet, there isn't much I can add as things could change. However, one of the cities is called Long Lai, which is located on the eastern border of Calvard. Additionally, Aaron, who comes from Langport, which is a very Eastern-inspired city, has 3 weapons with the Chinese dragon in the name. They are Dual Dragon, Red Dragons, and Gold Dragons. Apart from that, I can almost guarantee they will continue referencing dragons as we continue eastwards in Cimmeria. The only thing left is when talking to Whelmler in 2nd chapter, Zin will say, in the east, dragons are worshipped as heavenly beasts. Additionally, Shadowside will also say, few countries still have legends of dragons, but in every one I've encountered, they're said to be long-lived to the point of being ageless and immortal. I'll explain why this is important later on. So like I asked in the beginning, what happened to the dragons? This is only a theory, but I believe the dragons began to die out from some unknown cause and their corpses turned into Septium. Now that is a really bold claim, I know, but there is some evidence that hints towards it. First of all, the obvious dragon veins being called Septium veins. If that's a bit too much on the nose for you though, the second being Ragnard. In 2nd chapter, after releasing him from the Gospel, he rewards a Selling Co by giving Guldia Septium. Now yes, you could attribute that to him being a holy beast, but remember when I listed off the multiple examples of equipment with dragon in the name? Did you read the descriptions that were shown? If not, let's look over them. Dragon Skin Jumpsuit. A jumpsuit made from arch-resistant material. Dragon Tree Jumpsuit. Clothes with high arch resistance. 7 Dragons Armor. Faintly glowing body armor crafted with tempered Septium. There's also the Temperos Roar Lost art that summons 3 dragons from the Septium veins that punishes the party CP. So Falcom is most definitely creating a link with dragons and Septium, so it's possible that once the dragons were killed off, the other features were collected. This can explain some weapons like Charizard's Dragon Fang Whip, Yuna's Dragon Claw, Kurt's Cerulean Dragons, and Randy's Dragon Vendil. The last piece of evidence for this theory is actually within the enemies throughout these games. Not only do we rarely fight dragons in these games, but when we do, there is usually something else at play involved. In theory, we fight a Geryon, a dragon that lives on despite being reduced to a skeleton, but this is only ever fought in Phantasma. In Crossbell, we fight Org Varaz at Stargazer's Tower in Zero, which has the high elements present, or at Ursula Road in Azure, which was revived by the DG cult. Fairy Drake, which is a cryptid in the form of a dragon, and Org Grafassa, which is brought back to the world because of the Azure Tree. In Erebonia, we fight Infant Drango, Vamp Raptor, Lord Drango, and Dicephalosaurus, which only resemble dragons. Wyvern Warrior, Wyvern Wizard, Drackle Sword, and Drackle Staff that only appear during the shrines. Zora Araga was a cryptid that resembles a dragon, but is actually part of Agnes, who is a unicorn. Lastly is D. Bestial Jet, which is just a machine. So every time we do fight a dragon, they seem to be either resurrected or only look similar to dragons. That's more or less my theory. Something happened within Zemuria that killed off all the dragons, whose souls then got turned into Septium, and their bodies are forged for materials. The only thing left to discuss is the next Holy Beast. Now I don't have any ideas for Calvard's Holy Beast, but I have a guess for the Holy Beast of Water, and yes, it's a dragon. Again, there is some evidence to suggest this. First of all, there's the dialogue that Zin mentions in 2nd chapter. The fact that dragons are worshipped as heavenly beasts in the east, as well as Scheherazade mentioning that dragons are thought to be long-lived or immortal, would suggest that the holy beast within the Far East would be of a dragon. Additionally, in 2nd chapter, Annalise can obtain a weapon called Sairu Sword. When you look at the original name, it's called Seiru Haiho, which translates to Blue Dragon Blade. But once again, they use the Chinese style of writing dragon, and it's specifically a Qinglongying, which is a Chinese dragon god of water. This exact same name convention is used within Kurt's weapon in Cold Steel 4. Even within Japan, the Qinglongying is thought to be a guardian spirit of the east. Not to mention, the same name is used for one of the water quartz in the Cold Steel games. If we return back to Angelica's weapon, it does something similar where the specific dragon reference is actually a Kuzuryu. This is a 9-headed dragon god from Japanese mythology that is associated with water from the Heikone legend, where a Kuzuryu landed on a lake and demanded sacrifices. The final piece of evidence is Gaius' weapon, as the description reads, a well-crafted spear depicted in the Eastern Holy Beast. Now what's interesting about this is Gaius' family originate from Middle Zemuria, as they are related to the Kuga clan, so either this is some incredible foreshadowing or just a red herring. But based on how we know desertification has been occurring in the Far East since Cold Steel 3, I really like Luxin's idea in his video where he predicts the other Septarian.
While it's most likely that a lot of the other people were working in the background with the plans we've seen already, I wouldn't be surprised if Ouroboros has actively been operating in the East for a while, so there's a non-zero possibility that way at the beginning of Ouroboros, they already got the Septarian of Water, or at least did something to it to stop it acting on the continent, and we're just going to learn about that in retrospect way later when the story actually takes us out east.
The only problem I have with this theory is if Ouroboros has already obtained the Septarian of Water, then it seems strange to refer to the collection of the Septarian of Space as completing the first stage of the Orpheus final plan. However, since we know that we're dealing with time shenanigans in Calvard, anything is possible. Either way, these are just some of my random thoughts on the matter, and we'll see if anything is right or if I was completely off the mark. With that, I wish y'all all the best.